Thanks so much for joining us tonight. We'll be getting started in just a minute. Good evening to each of you and good afternoon for our Hawaii families. Thank you so much for joining us for Ask Me, our educational webinar series. My name's Audra Hines, Vice President of Care Services for the Golden West chapter of the ALS Association. I want to express our very sincere thanks to all of our mission benefactor families, including the Ron Malone Fund and the Morris Family Caregiver Initiative, to name just a couple. The Golden West chapter is able to host an impressive number of these webinars, as well as build upon our programming for the future because of the generosity of donors like these. Each person with ALS who registers with the Golden West chapter is connected to a professional regional care manager who has extensive knowledge of ALS and local resources. We're here for everyone facing this disease. Our compassionate care managers are available to help maximize health, independence, mobility, safety, and communication. They work tirelessly every day to ensure that our clients and families living with this disease have access to loans of critically needed medical equipment, referrals to some of the top ALS clinics and specialists in the country, navigation of benefits, and emotional support through a variety of ways for the entire family impacted by the disease. We'll be talking tonight specifically about emotional support and coping strategies in living with this disease. For some people, joining a support group is the right fit. For others, they might rather be connected one-to-one with others living with the disease. And for many who are facing the challenges of ALS, they're seeking referrals for a mental health professional to help. We're here for you, no matter which of these paths you might prefer. Whether you're a person with ALS, a family member, caregiver, or friend of someone living with the disease, we want to help you find the support that you need that's the right fit for you. For more information, please reach out to your care manager or visit alsagoldenwest.org to get connected. Tonight, we have a special guest with us to talk further about some ideas for adapting and creating coping mechanisms as ALS progresses. Dr. Kendal Maxwell is the clinical neuropsychologist for the Center for ALS Care at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. She's also the author of a guided journal titled 12 Months to Happier Habits, and she facilitates a couple of podcasts, including the 21-day Positive Mindfulness Meditation Challenge. Dr. Maxwell also provides psychotherapy via her private practice, specializing in existential therapy and cognitive behavioral therapy. Thank you so much for being here tonight, Dr. Maxwell.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
I'm going to let you take it away. Go for it.
All right. I'm just going to share my screen now. Hope everybody can see that.
Yeah, looks great.
Awesome. All right. So thank you for that introduction. It's nice to see everybody virtually. Hopefully you can see me, and maybe some of you have worked with me in the clinic in Los Angeles, but tonight I'm focusing on coping with ALS and doing it in a few different ways. So I'm going to talk about a variety of topics, and it might feel like I'm jumping from a lot, but I really just want to try to give as much information as I can. So the first thing I want to start with, oh no, it's not changing. Wonder if there's a better way to do that while we go. But the first thing I want to say is just ALS sucks. And I don't want to sugarcoat that. I don't want this presentation to feel like I'm overlooking that there's a lot of grief and a huge experience of change with that. But I do just want to try to give as much information as I can from my time working in the ALS clinic with patients. And, if something is triggering for you, then, this presentation may not be a good fit right now. And that's understandable because I'm kind of talking about a wide variety of the disease progression and what's helpful at different times. And I just want to try to be as helpful as I can, but I know it's not going to be applicable for everyone. So this is just a quote that I feel like really encompasses what's most helpful for adapting with ALS. And it's a quote that goes, "As the world we live in is so unpredictable, the ability to learn and to adapt to change is imperative, alongside creativity, problem solving, and communication skills." I feel like I'm frequently talking to people about how adaptation is, the best thing that somebody can have as a coping mechanism for this, and being okay with adapting and problem solving. And individuals that are able to do that end up coping better with this illness than other people do. So one of the biggest things I think from the very beginning with having a diagnosis of ALS is managing expectations. So initial expectations at the onset of the disease. ALS comes with lots of issues, as most of us know. And we have to be patient. We have to be patient with ourselves that we're not going to have all the answers right away, with our loved ones, that they may not be able to give us the support that we may be looking for at that time, because it's a shock to everyone's system. And we also have to try not to get sucked into going down the rabbit hole of the internet looking for answers, because at least when I've seen that done, it can lead to a lot of misinformation, and also a lot of traumatic visualizations of what the experience is like that may actually end up not being applicable to everybody. So, I always tell people at the very beginning, take the ALS Association resources, read books that are reputable, and listen to even ALS podcasts that are reputable. That's going to give you good information without taking you in the wrong direction and helping you kind of manage that. Another piece of this is we have to redefine expectations as the disease progresses. So, somebody that maybe was there for you at the beginning of your illness may not know how to show up later on in the illness. So I've seen this a lot with regards to like friendships, where somebody may, be able to come and support you emotionally, but then as your disease progresses, maybe they have something happen in their life, or maybe they don't know how to deal with grief very well on their own. So then they may become avoidant. And so we have to kind of readjust our expectations of others as things progress, because we can start to get angry or upset, and that ends up only kind of hurting our own emotional state in those moments. I have an example of this too, of a son who he was around pretty frequently during the first few years of his father's illness, but then later on wanted to move. And it was really hard for him to express that to his dad, because he was very worried about his dad's expectation for him being around all the time and helping. But when we had the conversation about that, we got to a place where the patient was actually very responsive to that and understood that, this is also your life as well. But he had to change his expectations of what his family could provide to him in a physical way. So just remembering, to do that throughout the disease process is really important. Accepting help and accepting equipment is another huge piece that I feel like some people really hold on to. So one thing I want to talk about is we are not meant to be independent at all times. And I think US culture really created that expectation, because I've also seen other cultures that I've gotten to work with in the ALS clinic, and they're more flexible to allowing people to help them, allowing people into their world that maybe are not family. I've also seen that become very rigid, where they've only allowed people that are their family members to help. And what that does is it creates a lot of stress on only a few people, when in reality, there's probably a lot more people that could help, that could allow the stress to be at a lower level for everybody if they were open to having others help with them. But yeah, we just really are not meant to be independent. So we have to get rid of that image that I did everything for myself. I'm always going to do everything for myself. I don't need any help. That's something that culture has thrown on us that I wholeheartedly feel like holds us back from living our best life, regardless of ALS or not, especially towards end of life. And also the benefits of, having somebody else outside of your family network help you, even if it's one day a week or a few hours a week or whatever the case may be. That allows you time to give back to your family, so that they can spend time with you or spend time being able to take care of themselves as well. And equipment. Throughout my years in the ALS clinic, I've watched people that have put off using equipment to help them, whether it's a wheelchair or the Tobii device to help with speech, or a number of other things. And what I've noticed is that when those people actually end up using the equipment later on, they frequently tell me that they wish they would have used it sooner, that they wish they would have ordered it sooner, because when they needed it, maybe the insurance wasn't there, or it was going to take a while for them to get something. And so it took them longer than what they wanted to be able to get it when they needed it, but also that they actually gained independence from using equipment. So they were able to go around the block in their power wheelchair, when before they were only in the house and they were just, immobile and not able to maneuver without somebody else having to be with them at all times. So there's lots of benefits. And I know that this kind of gets at US culture of, I don't want the equipment. And also I know it's an identity issue of having to have the equipment. And I don't want to take away from that it's a grieving process that you may experience as well, having to utilize something. But there is a lot of benefit to deciding to use things when the time does come. Another piece of coping with ALS is social support and figuring out what are my networks, who can I depend on for what, and not overutilizing a certain person. So 1 and 2 here, our spouse and our children, often get overutilized. And they can help with a lot of things. And most of the time, they really want to help with a lot of things. But they cannot do everything, and they cannot be expected to do everything, because it can be very stressful to have to be emotionally there for someone, physically there for someone, and do everything else that maybe they have to do for their life. So as much as we can, we have to think about how do we broaden our network. And I often talk to people about friends, kind of like what I spoke about earlier, but that friends serve very different purposes. So you may have a friend that can come and have lunch with you, which is good emotional support. Maybe they can come and have lunch with you once a week. But you may have another friend that maybe they keep asking, what can they help with? and nobody really knows like what to like have them help with, because our conceptualization is, oh, well, you can't really help move them or move the patient or the person that has ALS. But we have to broaden that. So thinking about, I've had people that have had friends come and help with chores. So they come and they do the laundry, or they'll take the trash out, or they'll help clean or mow the yard. Because basically, if the spouse is also doing all of those other things and taking care of someone with ALS, that's a lot. But there are ways for friends to help us with those other details, so that they can have more time to just be a family member, and more time to just have a good time and create good memories. Also, neighbors are a great resource. Even if you don't know the neighbors, I've had people that have built relationships with their neighbors because they have ALS and they want other people in the neighborhood to at least know kind of what's going on if there's an emergency, which then develops a relationship with those people so that they can come and help, or maybe they want to do something. Religious groups. I know Audra had talked about the support groups with ALS, or even other support groups and different hobbies, and the ALS clinic in general. So, I mean, the ALS clinic, the whole job, in my opinion, other than the research and obviously managing symptoms, the whole job of the ALS clinic is to think 10 steps ahead for you and your family, so that you can be as present with your life for as long as you have left. And so allowing them to help, allowing them to problem solve, they're thinking all of the steps ahead so that you can try to be as present as possible, and they can try to deal with as many of the headaches as possible. They can't deal with all the headaches. There's always going to be other headaches. There's going to be insurance issues, but they really are trying their best to think ahead for you, to support you as best as you can. So I highly suggest an ALS clinic as well. Coping strategies. So when we're thinking about coping, how do we cope with something that's happening to us? How do we cope with suffering? We have to broaden again what our concept is. So when somebody gets diagnosed with ALS, a lot can be taken away physically from that. So if somebody was an avid runner and that was what they relied on to cope with all of their emotions throughout their life, and then they no longer can run, those are sometimes the individuals that have the hardest time with having a diagnosis of ALS, because they haven't developed other coping strategies. So they're kind of starting from scratch, which is totally fine. And there's a lot of people that do that. But if you can think about, what were my coping strategies before ALS, and write them all down. I'm talking even childhood, which is kind of why I put this up here, finger painting. Writing down anything that was fun, anything that was engaging, anything that you appreciated that gave you joy at some point in your life, so that you have access to all of it. And if any of them can still be replicated in some way, shape, or form, to just start adding them to the schedule. If you have the financial ability, buy the things that are going to re-engage you with any of that. And then another piece of that is, what new things can I explore? And I know when we get older, it's really hard to think about wanting to start a new hobby, wanting to start a new project, but there's so many beautiful things to try, regardless of where you are in life, and so much more joy to be had, that, exploring that either by Googling adult activities list. I'm going to show you kind of one of them, but you can look at that on Google, and there's hundreds and hundreds of things, and you can just literally pick a few of them to try in the next week, the next month, the next year. But that's something to also kind of broaden our spectrum of what do we want to do on an everyday basis to help us cope with this, to give us joy. What can I adapt? I've had people that were bikers that ended up using electric bikes for a while, that then kind of went on, walks with their power wheelchair with people in the neighborhood, and just continuing to figure out what can I adapt that's still giving me joy. Making a list of things that you can do alone versus what can I do that requires others to be with me is really important, because you're going to kind of want both. You're wanting a huge amount of things that you can access at any time to help you with your mood and keep it stable. And then the importance of tiny moments. So tiny moments are everything. There's a lot of research behind the impact of having tiny moments of joy, like even 5 minutes a day of watching a funny YouTube video of kittens or whatever you feel like watching, versus going on a long vacation. And that people that do tiny moments of joy each day actually have the same benefit as going on a long vacation. So it's not going to help with everything, but I do think figuring out, okay, how can we play music while we're also getting ready to be put into bed? Can we, watch, like I said, a funny YouTube video before we go to sleep? Or if you're a caregiver or a family member, can I watch something while I'm even in the bathroom by myself, like getting ready for the day? That's going to just reset my brain. Can I write down 3 things I'm grateful for in the morning, which has a lot of research behind it too. And a lot of people that I've worked with that have ALS find including gratitude into their day is very helpful for their disease process and their coping. And another piece of this is living in a symptom focused versus wellness focused model of life. So with ALS, there are lots of medical appointments. You're constantly trying to keep up with your symptoms, figure out what you need to adapt, what equipment. There's a lot going on. So we can get very caught up in management, just symptom management. But we have to take a pause, whether it's every day, every week, to say, how can I live in a wellness-focused model of living where I'm also deciding to schedule happy things, memorable things with my family, with myself? How do I put that on the schedule and place as much importance as the medical appointments that we're also putting on the schedule? So this is kind of an activity list that I have that's for limited mobility. Obviously, some of these things are if you have somebody that, can take you, you have a transport van if you're needing it, and somebody's with you. So some of these things, obviously, you're still needing someone to be with you, but this is for limited mobility, accessible lists. And I can share my slides with the ALS Association as well. And this is not all encompassing, but I just want to continue to reiterate that there's lots of things that we don't think about that we still could do or kind of can push ourselves to try to do. And some of these things, especially because of COVID, have changed like the ability to access them. So there's actually like a lot of art museums that have virtual tour options now on their website. So you could go to Rome and do a virtual tour of like some amazing place. And it may not feel exactly the same, but it's going to break up the monotony of your day to be able to schedule things like that and do them with your family or even by yourself. So I want to talk too about the importance of structure. Our brain, I'm a neuropsychologist, so there's a lot of research behind this, but our brain really wants structure. It doesn't like when things aren't predictable, and ALS is unpredictable sometimes. So any way that we can create predictability allows us a few different things. One, it allows us to know like what's coming next. So I'm going to get up at this time. I'm going to have breakfast at this time. This person's going to come over and visit with me. But it allows you to be able to also schedule those happy moments or those things that you want in your day that are going to help you with the coping of this. It also allows for less mental energy and less psychological energy to be used. So fatigue is a huge part of ALS, and being able to find ways to manage energy and is something that is really needed. So one part of that is scheduling, because then you're not having to think about what's going on and what's coming next. It's already planned out for you. And that allows you to use your mental energy and physical energy on the things that are more enjoyable, or what's like right in front of you. It also helps with future-oriented thinking. So, to combat depression from building up, we have to have things in the future that we are looking forward to, whether it's literally at the end of the day that we're looking forward to something, or the end of the week, or the end of the month. So scheduling vacations, scheduling people coming to visit us, or us going to visit other people, or going to an event of some kind, that allows us to be thinking about something in the future that's going to bring us joy and keeps us in that mindset. So how do we do this? Creating calendars, creating alarms. I frequently have alarms on my phone for the next day for when I'm going to be doing stuff, so that I can remember 30 minutes before that I'm going to be doing it. And sending reminders to the people that are going to be helping us or engaging with us, so that they don't forget to come and do things with us. So those are all kind of things to be thinking about. And I've suggested for families or for couples, to spend like Sunday nights planning this out, especially food, because food is a lot of energy too with ALS, if you are still in the process of eating. And so being able to already have meals planned out of what's going to be happening can take a lot of mental energy off of caregiver and family, but also off of you if you have ALS. So I'm just literally putting the word spirituality here, because there's so much research, and I do not care what spirituality looks like to you. I don't care what religion you practice, if any, but there's so much research that if you are spiritual in any way, shape, or form, it helps with coping with ALS. It also helps with any terminal illness, but with ALS, there's research there. And so if you used to go to church, if you, used to engage in meditation, you had any contact with like a chaplain or anything like that, re-engaging in that in some way, even doing, virtual services, which many people have now, or practices have, can get you to have more peace, or may be able to get you to have more peace. Even doing meditation and just exploring a higher power of some kind. So some people do this where they're not even necessarily like visualizing a god, but they're visualizing a really beautiful large tree, or they're picturing their connection with the universe, or even a wise soul that's just older than us, kind of all encompassing, can be helpful to have us feel connected and rooted. And you can also do this by listening to podcasts, or reading spiritual books, or even listening to music. There's such a wide variety of how to expand this, but doing it consistently has a lot of benefit, even if you don't have ALS, but I highly encourage it if you do. Now, I know sleep is a huge problem with ALS for so many different reasons. I can't go through all of the things related to sleep, but I do want to talk about that managing and figuring out ways to help with sleep is really important to our quality of life. So if we don't get a good night's sleep, we're not going to be functioning well, regardless of what's going on. So some of the main pieces of this is structure is very important. It's important before you have ALS, but it's even more important when you have ALS, to try to go to the bed at the same time and get up at the same time. And if possible, only utilizing bed for bed. I know that doesn't become possible at certain points of this illness, but when it is possible, doing that, because if our brain has any association with bed that is not sleep, it has less of an association with sleep when it sees a bed. So we want our brain to only think of bed as place to sleep whenever possible. And if that gets broken, it can impact our sleep quality. Maybe getting a better bed is something that needs to happen, or getting different pillows, or even silk pajamas has been helpful for some of my patients because of, limited movement. Whatever you need to do that's financially within your means to help make that environment better and help you with sleep is really important. Using consistency of the breathing devices is also very important, because what we know about lack of oxygen is that it really can impact sleep quality. So the next day you're going to feel more tired if you haven't used the device. It can also cause significant headaches in the morning because our brain is not getting enough oxygen. It can also make us really irritable and have poor concentration, and ultimately impact our mood emotionally. So staying on top of those things, using medication if you need to, is really important. And mantras or meditation is also helpful. And I have a whole slide about meditation, so I'm going to skip that for now. Like I said at the beginning, I don't want to gloss over the importance of grieving. Grieving has to happen. There is a place for denial. There's definitely a place for denial, and I wholeheartely believe in living in denial for a certain period of time when you can, and in tiny moments when you can, because it's a coping mechanism and it can be effective. But to live always in denial is doing yourself a disservice from so many aspects of coping with this illness, and also just emotional growth. I've seen people that have so much emotional growth with having a diagnosis of ALS, and you really deprive yourself of that experience. And it's part of life to be able to feel all of that, to feel the emotions, to let them out. And, grief is at lots of corners of ALS. It takes us off guard. It happens in tiny moments. It happens when you're alone, when people are around. So if there's a way to allow yourself to schedule grief, that can be really helpful. This was actually represented in the show Shrinking, for anybody that's watched it. I think it's on Hulu, could be wrong, maybe Prime, but they basically demonstrate how somebody sets a timer and they allow themselves to just go there, to let it all out for a certain amount of time. And then when the timer's done, they let themselves off the hook to go and live their life. It doesn't always work because obviously, like I said, grief can hit us at any time, but it can be helpful to just take the time to really allow grief to exist and give it the space that it does truly deserve. Some people do this in very different ways, though, writing about it, drawing, painting. Some people will even watch a sad movie just to activate their ability to cry. And it's also a very safe way to cry because it's not technically associated with ALS. It could just be a sad movie that's romantic rom-com, but it allows you the access to start crying so that you can get into your grief and allow it the space to exist. We also have lots of beliefs about grief that are not true. A lot of us get taught when we're younger, we need to grieve alone. We need to be strong for others. We can keep busy to get out of grief. We shouldn't cry. But these are unfortunate things that society and our family, they teach us, but they're actually not helpful for grief. And I know that people want to not grieve in front of their loved ones and to be the strong one. But when we allow other people to grieve with us, it's a gift. It's a gift and it's also showing love. So if you can conceptualize that a little differently, that if you grieve and you're letting somebody else cry with you and they're grieving your process as well, it's connectivity. It's a moment to show love, to experience love, and to allow grief to exist in an environment that's not alone. So I'm not saying you have to always grieve with other people, but if you can, let other people in sometimes, because it's also a really good experience to have that connectivity. So this is a whole slide about meditation. Clearly, I'm a big fan. I have two meditation podcasts. I've drank the Kool-Aid. The reason I think it's so helpful for ALS is because it's accessible no matter what point of this disease process you're at. It helps you reconnect to yourself. It helps you stay in the present moment. It reduces blood pressure, depression, anxiety, and also existential distress. There's lots of different types. So maybe you tried meditation and it didn't work out for you, you didn't like it. It might be that it's the type that you tried, or it might be that you haven't done it consistently enough to experience what it's really there for. So I really urge you to kind of explore all of the different types that there are, see if there's something that fits for you. There's an 8-week course that's developed through a few different places around the US. It's called mindfulness-based stress reduction. There's a company called Mindful Leader that I did, but it like helps you become more consistent with meditation. So that's an option. UCLA has many options. There's lots of apps. I just truly believe that it's very healing. And I think it's just something that is very worth trying. So I'm just going to talk about perspective management really quickly. So this is Viktor Frankl's quote. It's a very famous quote. He's a psychiatrist who lived through the Holocaust. So he has a very interesting perspective. And he says, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. So I think when people have ALS as a diagnosis, this really comes into play, that we may not be able to change how our body is acting physically, but we have every ability to change how our perspective is related to our illness. And one of those things is becoming accepted with death as part of our life. So US culture does not practice this, but there's lots of cultures that death is a natural part of our existence. And to become familiar with it and play with it and find ways to kind of interact with it allows us to break the anxiety component that can come from thinking about our death. So one of the things that I tell people, even in their 20s, to do is to wake up every day and say, I am going to die. What this does is it helps us focus on the present moment, remind us to do what we want to do that day that's going to be important to us, and live from that perspective. And the more times that we say something like that, the less anxious that we become, because we're getting used to having a relationship with death, which again is not something that happens very much in American culture, but it is one way to do it. Another way are some of the things that I've listed. So even just listening to other people's perspectives about death, about their experience with ALS, can shift our perspective about what our thoughts are about something and allow some space. So again, meditation is a huge way to kind of access that and play with our own perspective, but so are, reading books by people that have had ALS, or even just different perspectives on dying, talking to chaplains, listening to audiobooks, even going on walks in nature, or experiencing the vastness of connectivity. One of the last things I'll mention here is engagement in plant medicines like psilocybin or ayahuasca, peyote, or even MDMA in places where it's legal around the US. There's a lot of research coming out that doing so can actually help with existential anxiety and death acceptance. So those are other things to think about, is how do I start to engage with that and not become so fearful or focused on it throughout the rest of my day? How do I allow it, again, the space for it to exist so that I can be present with everybody on the other parts of the day? Lastly, therapy versus medication or both. So therapy is great for grief. It's great for problem solving. How do I want to start to learn to meditate? Working through conflicts that you may have with like a spouse or family member, like how do we want to go about this? Maybe we can have them in a session with my therapist so that we can talk through what's going on. It can help with kind of starting to engage in legacy building, which can be really helpful towards end of our life of what do we want to leave behind? How do we want that to look? And there's different websites to kind of try to find a provider on. Psychology Today is one of them, where you can filter sometimes by insurance and other specialties. Meet Monarch. If you are not able to really communicate well with speech anymore, BetterHelp and Talkspace are actually text messaging therapy services where you pay as you go. I frequently tell people that's a good option if you are, you may get more bang for your buck because you're not having to just do a session for an hour. You are, paying like to have little mini moments with a therapist. And so you can write out an email using like a Toby device or something like that and utilize your time more efficiently. Medication, though, is very helpful as well. There's lots of things related to ALS that therapy cannot assist with. If your diaphragm is starting to become weakened and you're having an experience of anxiety from bottom up because your diaphragm's not working, so your breathing pattern's different, then it's not thoughts down. It's not top down that's like causing that. It's bottom up. It's our body. So sometimes anxiety medication can be more helpful in that circumstance to kind of help us feel relaxed. Same with sleep issues. And even, antidepressants can be helpful because if you're feeling like you're depressed at a 7 out of 10, antidepressant can kind of take that to a 5 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10 so that it's a little bit more manageable and you can re-engage with life or even re-engage in therapy. So combo is also really helpful. And if you're trying to lessen the intensity of the emotion and you also are dealing with grief, which many of us are, then doing both at the same time can be really helpful and the most beneficial. So that's it for me. These are my other offerings. I'm here to answer questions. This is the guided journal that was mentioned. It's on Amazon. And these are the 2 meditation series that I have on Apple, Spotify, all the fun places. Those are free. And the acceptance meditation challenge has a death meditation at the end of it if you wanted to explore it. But that's it for me. I hope this was helpful. I know it's a lot. I just wanted to get everything out there. So
you did such a great job getting so much out there, Dr. Maxwell. Thank you. And yeah, you know what? Leave this slide up maybe while we're chatting and answering some questions, just in case people want to make a note. We have had a couple of people ask about getting the slides afterward. So yeah, if you want to just send those to me, we'll be sure that they're available to everyone who wants them. So
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for allowing us to do that. We have a couple of really good questions. Someone is asking about whether ALS has physical effects on cognition
Mhm.
as opposed to the effects of any major illness on cognition, just looking at that related to ALS.
Yeah. So it can. It doesn't happen to everybody. I want to say that it's usually around like 30 to 50%. In some studies, I feel like it's more like 30%, but have some mild cognitive changes, whereas about 15 to 20% can start to develop behavioral changes and also memory changes. That is considered frontal temporal dementia. So that's the dementia that can sometimes happen with ALS. And if you are worried about something like that, or your family member may not be acting the way that they used to, and this can be demonstrated by like lack of empathy, making inappropriate comments towards strangers or even our loved ones, acting more childlike, or even reverting in. Sometimes people will just stop engaging and be very withdrawn. Then definitely, if you're involved in an ALS clinic, have a neuropsychologist see them, or even just tell the neurologist and see if they want to do some testing. Or if you're not, you can try to find a neuropsychologist in the community to diagnose or help see if that's present.
That's a great suggestion. We always tend to refer people back to their ALS clinics for some of those answers too. I know we've had a couple of questions tonight about how do I find an ALS clinic, and I just want to say to everyone out loud, we do have a list of clinics throughout California and Hawaii on our website too, so be sure to check that out. Someone else is asking if you have any tips for how they might help their loved one come out of their denial. They say, we aren't moving forward or using needed equipment because of this denial.
Yeah. That's a really tough place to be at. Usually you cannot move someone out of denial. Sometimes I've had family members where they've had like a family meeting with their loved one and come from like a place of love to explain like how not using the equipment's kind of affecting their emotional state, or even, their ability to like do their own management of their lives. Maybe they're having to help more than they would actually have to if somebody would utilize some equipment. So that may be one route to take, or if they have a person that they feel closest with that may be willing to kind of step in and have that conversation with them. If not, you can see if they would be willing to engage in therapy. Usually people that are really heavy deniers don't really like us, don't really like psychology. That's not always the case, but usually, they're presenting and wanting to feel like they're fine, which is it's okay, but it is a safety risk sometimes. But those are my suggestions. But it is very hard. Sometimes I even often say you have to let people be people, and if they have the capacity to make a poor decision, and we've told them, what equipments they should use. Sometimes it ends up becoming that a big mistake has to happen for them to realize they need to use something. And we can't always avoid that. And we also shouldn't take on the feeling of like guilt or remorse, or feeling like we made a mistake because they got hurt. Sometimes it does, unfortunately, take somebody getting physically hurt for the denial or the change to come. And that's okay too. It's not the best route, but sometimes that has to happen.
Yeah, it's such good suggestions. This one's a tough one. Just thinking about how to start coping when you're newly diagnosed. This is from someone who has a tentative ALS diagnosis, and they're scheduled to confirm this soon with an ALS clinic. And just any suggestions on how to start right from the beginning like this?
Yeah. Well, if you haven't been diagnosed yet, you've got it on the schedule. What I'd say is for that day specifically, plan what you're going to do after. If it's, like, don't make it on a day where you've got other things going on, like give yourself the space, figure out, okay, if I am diagnosed, who do I want to be with? What do I want to do? If I'm not diagnosed, what do I want to do with that day then? Or how do I want to kind of cope with that? So that's what I would say that day, and just engage in all of the comfort that you can, whatever it is, it's going to just allow you to just be, and let it out. If there's grief, if there's shock, sometimes neurologists are going to say, I'm not sure if this is ALS. And then you get stuck in this huge limbo sometimes for a long time, sometimes where you're kind of like, is this ALS? Is this not? And my heart really goes out to patients when they're in that space, because it's a lot of gray area and it's very tough to hold that. But just know that ALS is one part of you, and there are so many other pieces of your identity, and just hold on to that throughout the whole thing, but especially at the beginning. Like, remember who you are and who you're still going to be. And, if you want to start looking at things, you could, but I think just kind of holding on to the present moment is important, especially before you even know.
Great ideas. And the only other thing I'll add to this person who asked the question, and to anyone else too, is if you're already connected with one of our care managers, please be sure you reach out to them after you have some confirmation around this. We want to offer that support to you as well.
Yes, definitely. The association has so many good resources.
Yeah, happy to help from the Golden West chapter. A couple more questions we have here. This is also a tough one. Any recommendations about how to confront alcohol abuse after an ALS diagnosis?
I'm not sure specifically if they're talking about that their loved one that has ALS has alcohol issues or not, or if, they're talking about somebody else. But if it's that somebody has ALS and then they're using alcohol to cope, it's tough. So, if alcohol is the only coping mechanism that this individual has, we have to have empathy for that. Because if you just take alcohol away and they're left with nothing else to cope with something very large, it's not good, and it's not going to help anybody, and they're going to be resentful. But I think, there are ways to, one, support somebody in developing other strategies. If you're in the home, just start doing other coping mechanisms for mood with them. That's going to kind of force them to start seeing that there's other ways of the world. And then if you feel comfortable, maybe it's not about getting rid of it altogether, but maybe it's about trying to work on 3 beers a day instead of 5, and seeing if, having a conversation about that, if they would be open to at least some harm reduction, and practicing kind of the small wins of that. Or if they would be open to, again, engaging in some type of therapy along with the alcohol use, and not taking it away, but starting to try to figure out, how do we build coping mechanisms around this person so they don't have to rely on it so much.
That makes a lot of sense. And tied into the denial question, somebody's asking what you think of this approach. They're saying it's a 3-step approach to denial, and just wondering what you think about this. Number 1, looking at the natural consequences that happen. Number 2, next level is the impact it's having on you and others. And the 3rd level is, how it's impacting the person who's denying.
Yeah. I mean,
that makes sense.
Yes, that definitely makes sense. If it's a safety issue that's going to impact other people, like we've had that happen sometimes with driving, where somebody continues to want to drive. That's a point in time where we do want to get somebody maybe within the medical system involved, and kind of letting their doctor know what's going on, so that the doctor can be the bad guy and kind of taking the reins of making that decision rather than family having to be the bad guy.
Makes a lot of sense. Someone else is just making a suggestion to others, suggesting that the person who is in ALS limbo right now, who's trying to confirm their diagnosis, stay off the internet wormhole, is what they're saying.
Exactly.
Sometimes the information's accurate and sometimes it's not.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you may have weakness from something completely different. So I tell people, just if you're going anywhere, just go to the ALS Association website. And if you don't have a diagnosis yet, I really wouldn't dive too much in any direction, especially because the ALS trajectory is very different depending on person to person, even like the length of years and the progression of symptoms. So it's not, if you're looking at something, it may not even be applicable to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the last comment on here that's not really a question is just a person who's addressing their own sadness, and that they don't really have a husband or partner in their life. Just trying to seek some support around that. Any tips or advice, as you probably have people coming to your private practice, Dr. Maxwell, who are in a similar situation, what do you typically say to them?
Yeah, it's different for every person. I hate giving that answer, but it is different for every person. I have an individual right now who's progressed enough where they really can't leave their home, and a lot of their family has kind of avoided them because of the emotions. So we were just problem solving or exploring, even getting into like virtual worlds. Where people don't even know that you have ALS. So whether that's like a multiplayer video game or some type of like a virtual life system within, a PS5 is what I've heard is the best thing because it has eye tracking, but there's other ways to kind of still develop a community, even if it's just for emotional and it has nothing to do with ALS. And I know people may be like, I've never been a gamer before, but it's not really about that. It's about that you're creating a social network, and that's one of the easily accessible ones that's not going to be taken from you if you can't leave your home. But there's lots of other ways to redevelop and re-engage with life. Like I said, with the social support of exploring meetups, getting back into different hobbies that you used to appreciate, that maybe you have more time for, that are social environments. And there's also a lot of research behind even just being in social places and not even engaging has positive impact on our mood. So if you're able to physically going to a coffee shop for 1 hour a day and reading a book and just having people around you talking can have some benefit to your emotional state. It's not obviously the same as socializing with somebody one-on-one, but it does have some impact. So I would say, explore and problem solve and get creative of developing a social network.
Mm-hmm. And finding groups that are of interest to you and relevant to you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. Like the ALS support group's great too, if you're wanting to lean into ALS world. And then, therapy, because that's the whole job of a therapist, is to also help problem solve. How do we develop this for you? What does this look like? And support you through that.
I can't thank you enough for being here tonight, Dr. Maxwell. We talked about some tough stuff tonight, and I think that this was exactly what some people in our audience needed to hear. And I really appreciate you being here. I think we have some other slides we're going to pop up real quick here at the end, but this was wonderful. Appreciate all of these great resources. And I want to thank everybody else so much for joining us tonight too. we're grateful to each of you for your time and your commitment and for being a part of our community. Just a quick reminder, wanted to invite you to save a couple of dates coming soon for some chapter events. We have a Jim Tracy 5K to defeat ALS, as well as our SoCal Ride, Hike, and Walk to defeat ALS. They're both coming very soon. We'd love to have you join us for a beautiful day outdoors at either of these fun, inspiring, and community building events. And as we wrap up, as you know, philanthropy fuels everything we do, and we're very grateful to committed donors who give generously throughout the year. To learn more about how you can support the valuable programs that we offer, like this one tonight, please visit our website at give.alsagoldenwest.org and watch out for the short survey on tonight's presentation that you'll receive via email to help us plan for future programs like this one. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.